When I first finished Final Fantasy VII Remake, I was a little bit devastated. Did Square really just reveal, through the form of a narrative twist in the final moments of the most anticipated remake of all time, that they've been lying to us all along and actually have no intention of remaking the rest of the original story? Did they really make the characters' goals be to prevent the now deemed bad ending of the original classic from transpiring? Did they really just give a big fuck you to the nostalgic dreams of the very fans they directly marketed this nostalgia-fueled remake to? At first, I thought the answer to these questions was a pretty clear yes. Square didn't want to retread old territory, and they're too preoccupied with their newfound obsessions with time travel and defying destiny to put in the efforts to pull this off faithfully for at least 2 more games, right? Well, now that I've had over a week to dwell on this, I not only think that none of those statements are particularly true, but I think Square is setting us up to do the exact opposite. After all, if my original interpretation was true, they literally turned the message of the original game, accepting loss, into the exact opposite message, rejecting loss and making everything perfect. So I think it's important to remember that this ending, it's the end of Act 1 of a 3-act story. And since when do characters complete their arcs and know exactly how to succeed in their ambitions at the end of Act 1? I believe this ending was always intended to be controversial, and I also believe that's okay, because what it sets up for may not only redeem the choices that upset us in this game, but may just provide a companion piece to Final Fantasy VII that enhances the experience instead of retreading it. And I believe by the end of this video, you'll agree with me. Now, up front, I do maintain that the execution of this ending was more than a bit sloppy, and raises some questions towards whether Square has a good head on its shoulders to tell a cohesive story going forward, despite how strong most of this game was. In general, the climax feels like a massive left turn in almost every regard, and I found it to be quite jarring. It's a left turn in terms of world logic and tone, transitioning from struggling to invade an office building to destroying what can only be described as a god of time the size of a skyscraper, all in a matter of minutes. Most detrimentally, it's a left turn in terms of narrative themes. After spending over 30 hours watching well-written characters struggle with classism, great loss, and what it means to be part of a family, we suddenly end the whole game focused on the debatably trite themes of destiny and changing fate, which hadn't so much as been hinted at beforehand. However, Square obviously has a reason for doing this, and I really don't think that their reason is to forever piss us off, nor do I think that it's to make a statement of intent about how little they respect the original story, or how much they want to alter or remove crucial themes and moments. I do, however, think that they want to make us worry, that they want us to theorize, and most of all, they want to remove any ounce of confidence that we know what's coming next. And part of that is to deliberately mislead us with what the ending sets up. In part, I think that's a cheap ploy to get hype moving for the next installment, instead of relying on the promise of more of what you just played, but I also think that these extreme reveals are intentionally setting up future twists that reveal that these characters are not only wrong about their altruistic, destiny-defying intentions, but that they are going to have to change course and actively fight to restore the original Final Fantasy VII's events and prevent Sephiroth from erasing a classic. If this is the case, I believe the sequels to this game will succeed at amplifying the game's stakes in a way that actually hammers home the main theme of the original, accepting that great loss is a necessary part of life, in a way that simply retelling the well-known story could not. So let's break this down from the beginning. The original game's plot involves a super soldier named Sephiroth who, from the lifestream after his death, finds the knowledge to manipulate his fellow super soldiers in the living world to do what is necessary to restore his full power. We follow the soldier Cloud, who seems to receive the most significant blow of this manipulation. In the remake, despite it seeming that Sephiroth may be very different than we remember, I don't think there's any reason to doubt that this is still the same Sephiroth. He's constantly trying to manipulate Cloud into helping him achieve his goals, and seems quite ready to absorb the Arbiters of Fate after the party defeats them. He then gives Cloud an ominous challenge of sorts, basically letting the player know that defeating Fate means the door is now open for Sephiroth to accomplish his goals. To me, there's no other way around this. Sephiroth manipulated the party into defeating Fate, so that he could escape his destined destruction. Of course, if the party sees visions of out-of-context destruction and believes that's what happens if they defeat Sephiroth the intended way, that they'd want to avoid it, and that's exactly what Sephiroth wanted. Now, as we go forward into the next game, we're going to realize that with fate either destroyed or on Sephiroth's side, that things might not be as optimistic as Aerith pitched them at the end of the first game. The party will keep psyching themselves up, telling each other that the future is a blank page and such, but ultimately, with fate gone, the losses they suffer are going to keep stacking up, and it's going to push the party to the emotional limit. Eventually, they'll realize, as many protagonists in stories involving time travel eventually do, that trying to avoid all loss and securing a perfect future is not a realistic or emotionally mature goal to hold. I believe this will reach its boiling point when Sephiroth, full of omniscient knowledge about what led to his downfall in the original Destiny-approved canon, avoids killing a certain character, forcing them to take their fate into their own hands. This, among other story revelations I'm looking forward to, will force the party and the player to confront the necessity for accepting great loss, and in a way that I do not think a mere retread would come close to achieving. And on a metatextual level, it will do this while putting the player in the role of the heroes fighting to ensure that the core events of one of their favorite games still happen. In this future, Sephiroth is the ultimate threat to the fans not getting the remake they want, and I think that could be just brilliant. Now, of course, there are a lot of other weird time travel and or multiverse clues scattered around the ending that don't have too many hints surrounding them to suggest their future payoffs, but I'll address the Zack stuff with one thought. Yes, the important figure whose death serves as a catalyst in Cloud's life seems to survive, but I can see them going forward with this idea in a few different ways that would support the theme of the importance of loss. If it is an alternate timeline, it's possible we could see the outcome of that world and realize that without his death, meaning also without the Cloud we knew, that that's a timeline where Sephiroth does win. Or, as we'll later see, Zack still does get gunned down immediately after what the ending shows us. After all, it does start raining, and in both Crisis Core and FF7, Zack dies in the rain. Either way, they could certainly be using the Zack survival as a red herring, used to later hammer in the importance of his death. I think how you view the statements of intent in Final Fantasy VII Remake's ending boil down to whether or not you believe that Square actually decided to make the most prominent narrative theme in the remake be the exact opposite of the message in the original game. Taking a beloved story about learning to accept great loss and turning it into a massive saga about defying destiny and making sure your life turns out just perfect would be a really tragic and disappointing direction for them to take this story. Now, maybe they did do that, but there's no way to know right now, so I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. In any regard, I love the buzz that this ending has caused, and I'm much more excited to see what comes next than I would have otherwise been. Maybe it's a little optimistic of me, but I don't think Square is dumb enough to make such a disappointing decision with a property so loved, especially when they put so much care into making the majority of this game so incredibly faithful to the soul of Final Fantasy VII. We'll find out soon.